welcome back to the Girly Girl Bookworm. So today I have for you my March wrap-up part 2. So I read a ton of books in the second half of March. I don't know what it was. I just was on a crazy kick. Like I've always said, if you're new to following me, I am somebody right now who has constantly like 3 books going at one time, if not more. I've got an audiobook always going. I always have an ebook going, and I have a physical book going. I have a toddler and I have a newborn. Well, he's not really a newborn anymore. He's 2 months old tomorrow, aka the day you're seeing this, April 3rd. He's going to be 2 months, and I just always have to have a balance of like, if they're not around or they are doing something, I'm able to listen to an audiobook, or if they're not around, I could read something physically, or if they're around, I want an ebook because then I could just like click through a little bit easier. So I always have a book going for any situation. This month, however, I was also like crazy audiobook listening because I went through an itch where I just like cleansed my entire house pretty much. There's still a couple like closets and things that I need to do, but I literally went room by room by room, and I cleaned out the entire house, and basically bought every bucket organizer situation that I could buy from Target. So I went a little nuts, which meant that I was doing a lot of audiobook listening. So that's where a lot of these books came from. So let's just dive in. I think when I last left you, I was talking about that I was finishing Finlay, Donovan, Knox, Dead by El Casamano. This is the sequel to Finlay, Donovan is Killing It. And this is a really fun series. It sounds like the series is actually going to be a quite lengthy one, which I am all for. This is following Finlay Donovan, and in the beginning, in the first book, when we meet her, she is a like romance suspense writer, and she's in a Panera. She's like pitching her new idea to her like agent, and somebody hears her and is like, ooh, she's a hitman, and like slips her a thing like, kill this guy for this amount of money. And it just spirals out of control. And in this book, Finlay is in another predicament. It takes place right as the first book ends, so I don't really want to like go into like what her predicament is, but I found it just as fun. I think I liked the first book a little bit more, but I love the series nonetheless. I think that we got to know the characters a lot more in this one, and I'm excited to see where they grow and continue to change in the next ones. But I love it because it's got some romancy vibes, but it's also got some thriller vibes because there's the mystery going on, but it's also got some funny, it's got some humor. So it's kind of just like one of those like well-rounded fun books to read. So I highly recommend it. I gave this one 4 stars. Let's see if the cat will tolerate me putting books there. Then, and I'm going to say some of these books might not be in order just because I tend to write them down as I start them, and I don't always finish them in the order that I write them. So the next one I'm going to talk about is With Love from London. And this one, it was a book that was recommended to me over on Instagram for a 12 books to read challenge for the year. So like you go on Instagram and you're like, challenge me to read some books, and like you take 12 recommendations, and those are the 12 you read, and this is one of them from that list. And I was basically recommended to read something by this author, and I decided to go with this one because it just came out in February, so it's like newest release, it's got to be good. So I picked it up and I loved this book. So we are following a dual timelines situation where we're following one, and it's in the current timeline. She is recently divorced. Her mother has passed away, and her mother really has not been in her life since she was like 12. Her mother went off to London, and kind of she never saw her again. So she finds out that she has left her estate, which is basically a bookstore in London, and so she like goes there to like figure out what she wants to do with this bookstore. And then the other perspective, we are following her mother in the past, leading up to kind of like why she wasn't really in her daughter's life. This book was phenomenal. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it because there was, again, it has a little bit of everything. There was romance. There was like a scavenger hunt going on. There was like coming to terms with like different types of relationships, friendships, and motherhood, and just it made me bawl my bloody eyes out. And there's a big cat that lives in this bookstore, so it was just every book lover's dream right there. So I really enjoyed this one. I'm so glad that it was recommended to me, and I think that I will definitely be reading from this author again in the future. So that was pretty awesome. Then I read A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. And guys, you're not going to believe it, but this was another 5-star read. So one morning I woke up before both kids, which is like very rare. Normally I'm waking up because of both kids, let alone waking up without both kids. So I come in here and I'm like, I need to pick a physical read. I don't know what I want to read. I just need to pick something. And I like picked this up. I was like, I don't know if this is what I'm going to want. Read a chapter and I was sucked in. I was like already 30 pages in and one of the kids woke up and I was like, no, because I want to keep reading. I could not put this book down. This is following a woman, and when she was younger, her father goes away for basically being a serial killer. All these girls were going missing, and then all of a sudden her father gets arrested and he goes to jail for this. And now it's years later, she's engaged, she's kind of moved on with her life, she's still very like affected by it, but it's 20 years later, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary, she's about to get married, and all of a sudden, girls, like teenage girls again, are starting to go missing, and they start to look a lot like her father's like murders. So she's starting to wonder, is this related to my father? Is this a copycat murderer? Like, what's going on? This was fantastic. There is a part that I like 100% predicted at the end, and I didn't even care. I was like, I'm here for this book. I was just so, I don't know what it was, but I was so captivated in this book that I could not put it down. I love the twist. I love the journey that we took with this main character. I think this was her debut novel, and again, like I said with the last one, this will not be the last time I read this book, this author. You ready for it, guys? So far we had a 4-star read, a 5-star read, and another 5-star read. And then I read another 5-star read. Like, you're not gonna, like, I've been reading lots of 5 stars lately, and I'm really here for it. So this is Finding Tessa, and this is by Jamie Lynn Hendricks, and I saw this over on Instagram. Somebody reviewed it, and I knew I had to read it. I had seen it earlier on book 2, I think, at one point. Like, I remember seeing this, but I, like, never really gave it 2 thoughts, and then somebody else recommended it, and suddenly it clicked that I needed to read it too. And this is following a couple. And when we meet the man, we find out that his wife is missing. And obviously, we know that everyone's gonna look at him because everybody always looks at the husband. And then the other perspective is his wife, who we find out is trying to make it look like her husband murdered her. So, very interesting. It literally says Gone Girl sized twist, and I feel like it's crazy. I'm gonna say this. It felt very Gone Girl-esque, which I know like we're always on the hunt for like the next Gone Girl, and this one kind of fit that ticket. There were twists that I did not see coming at all. I loved how this author does a really nice job of making you think you know something and then twisting it later to make you realize that what you thought you knew was not even true, and it was mind-boggling, and I, for one, really enjoyed it. Short chapters, which I always love. I think there are short chapters in this one too, which again, I always love that in a thriller. Give me all the short chapters, and I'm here for it because it just makes it so hard to put down. So again, another 5-star thriller. I don't think I need to say more about that. Definitely check that one out if you're into that thriller vibe. After that, I read Fair Catch by Candy Steiner. I read this through Kindle Unlimited, even though obviously I had to buy it because it's Candy. This one I gave 4 stars to. This one is a college romance, which I always am here for because I feel like we don't get that enough. This is following Riley, and she is a twin. And when they're in high school, her brother gets into a horrible accident, which leaves him paralyzed. And he says to his sister, like, I want you to live my dream for me. I want you to go, and I want you to play football, and I want you to play football in high school. I want you to play football in college. So she, as his twin, happily agrees. So she does this. Only problem is they're starting their freshman year of college, and she's about to play football. Well, she's been playing football, but she's about to play football with the guy who basically caused her brother's accident. So she hates him, Even though they used to be like siblings and like this, like she hates him. And now they took like an extra person on the team or something, and even though she was supposed to be by herself in her own room, she needs a roommate. And Zeke offers to be her roommate. So it's kind of like a friends to enemies to lovers kind of situation. So there's a big problem that happens at the end. You know how romance goes. Like, we fall in love, and then, like, there's a problem, and then we go back in love with each other. The problem I 100% predicted. Like, it was kind of like one of those, like, loose hidden problems that, like, if you didn't, like, weren't reading closely, you might not realize it was going to be the problem. But, like, for me, I knew it the second it happened. I was like, that's going to be their problem. Guaranteed that's going to be their problem. And I was right. And the other problem that I had with it, why I couldn't give it 5 stars, is I felt like I understood Zeke's feelings from the very beginning. I feel like I knew what he was thinking and how he was feeling. And Riley was very different, because Riley was very like, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And then out of nowhere, she was like, oh yeah, I love you too. Like, I'm going to be with you now. And it was like very strange to me, because it didn't like, I didn't feel that like, hate to, okay, I could tolerate you, to love situation. It just felt like it went from like, I hate you to I love you really fast. So, not my favorite by her. But I also love, too, whenever Candy involves football in her books, because it just, you could feel Candy's passion for football in her football stories. So there's that one. I listened to Peach Blossom Spring by Melissa Fu. This one is a generational story where we are following a family, and it starts off when they are in China and Japan is invading, and we follow this family and how this has affected them and how eventually they come to America. So we follow the mother, which then we follow into the son, which then we follow into his daughter. So I don't want to take away from the importance of this story, because I feel like the story was really important, but for some reason, I don't know if it was the audio style or what, but I just didn't connect. Like, I always felt like this outsider that was like peering in instead of being really a part of their lives and their emotions. It like slightly was like third person, but tried to be very personal, and I never fully connected. It like, I kept thinking in my head as I was listening to it, that it felt like when Hermione Granger is like reading, like telling the story of the 3, oh my gosh, I can't say it. Like the invisibility cloak, the 3 brothers. And it felt like that's what was happening. Like, I felt like that was the tone I was being read to in. And so it felt very parable-esque, or like very like fairy tale-esque. And I just felt like I was never fully connected into the story. I also went into this weirdly thinking that we were going to get like different perspectives or different timelines, like a dual timeline situation instead of just one fluid story. So that kind of threw me a little bit too. So I was a little thrown off by this entire book for some strange reason, but I don't want to take away from the importance of it, because I feel like it is a story that definitely needs to be heard and definitely needs to be told. I think I just went into it with different expectations, and the writing style just wasn't clicking with me. But I've seen so many people love this one, so if you've had any idea of wanting to read this, definitely give it a shot. I just think I was in a weird place for it. So I gave it 3 stars because it was still a good book. I wasn't connecting. Then we've also got How to Fail at Flirting, which I know the order is messed up because I know I didn't finish this one next, but it is what it is. And this is by Janice Williams. I bought this one in February with the Target sale, and so it was one that I wanted to get into read in February, and I just couldn't fit it in. But guess what, guys? Another 5-star read. This is another 5-star read. This is a romance. We're following a woman, Naya, like papaya, which she will tell you lots of times. This book, so she is a college professor. You could tell that she's very passionate about what she does. Her program might potentially get cut right now, so she's a little like nervous. She just recently, in the last 3 years, got out of a very tumultuous relationship, and it's kind of really caused her to like push the brakes, because she's very about being safe at work, being safe in her life, just being buttoned up and safe. Her friends are not about that, and they kind of make this fake list with her of like, you're going to get a guy to buy you a drink, you're going to have a one-night stand, you're going to do all these things that are not like you. And so she decides to kind of go along with it, and she goes out to a bar and she meets this guy and she's like, maybe I'll have my one night stand with you. And they have like this instant chemistry that just like jumps off the page. Like you could feel their comfortability with each other. And they've just got this humor and this fun dynamic that I absolutely loved. But the problem is he might be the person who is like the riskiest person to get in a relationship with right now. And he might jeopardize a lot of things for her. Like I said, 5 stars. It was a lot of fun. The banter, the wittiness, the ability to kind of have those dark moments of trying to really refine yourself. She grows so much throughout the story. I think he does too, but she really grows a ton in herself, with a relationship with herself, in a relationship with colleagues, in a relationship with a man. She just really like comes full circle. And what I could really appreciate is, even though they had that instant spark and that instant connection, I felt like the relationship and her growth overall didn't feel rushed. Like how I was saying with Fair Catch Out, kind of like switched really fast. Like this felt very well paced out, and I really appreciated it, and I really can't wait to read more by her. Then I listened to, I still have it where I marked it at one point, Piece of Extraordinary Circumstance by Ruth Emmy Lang. This is about, oh no, what's happening? My Adobe's trying to like install an update for it. So this was also recommended to me on Instagram as the Instagram challenge to read. And this one was probably the one that I was the most nervous about, because I remember when this was first a choice on Book of the Month and I was like, no. And then people still buzzed about it and I was still like, no. And so I was really nervous when somebody recommended this to me that I almost want to pretend like I didn't see the recommendation. But I'm really glad that I picked it up. This is following a boy and his parents die, and he basically is raised by wolves. And I was like, are we the Jungle Book? Like, what's happening? And this girl comes into his life and it kind of picks up from there. We are following this boy through his life, but we're not even following it through him. We're following it through other people who are interacting with him and coming into his life. At one point, there's a tornado on Christmas, and it appears that he has stopped it. And so there's a lot of like, is he magical? Like, is there something extraordinary about him? Like, what's going on? And like I said, so you see different perspectives. You see this girl's perspective of him. You see like when he goes to live with somebody else, like you see like their perspective of him. So like you're constantly getting different perspectives of people who really like him and people who really don't like him. And they're trying to wrap their brains around him. And it was just a really fun journey. If you're going to do this book, I also recommend listening to it on audio, because each perspective has its own like narrator, which I love. I love cast narrations. So it really felt like you were getting that like story told to you from all these different people. And I really enjoyed this one. I either gave it 4 stars or I gave it 4.5 stars. Either way, like it was really good. And I'm glad that I picked it up. I think there's a sequel or there's another book that she's written about other potential like mystical people. So I definitely feel like I would possibly give that one a shot. But I haven't heard anybody talk about it. So I don't know. Like this one I heard a lot of buzz about. I've never heard anybody talk about the sequel. So I don't know. If you've read it, let me know. And then I DNF'd a book after all those 5-star books. Now You See Me by Chris McGeorge. George McGeorge. Chris McGeorge. Whoa. Chris McGeorge. So this one was a book that I put on a list of like books that were like intimidating me or like books that made me nervous. And this was a book that made me nervous because I read a book that I really enjoyed by him, but then I heard really awful things about this one. And this was on Hoopla as like a download. And so I downloaded it and I didn't even get through the first chapter. I like could not, I don't know what it was, the writing style, something wasn't working for me. And it just, I couldn't do it. So I ended up DNFing that one. And then I read, since I couldn't read that one, I picked up 3 Single Wives by Gina LaManna from Hoopla as well. And this one I read as an ebook. I got this one as a Goodreads giveaway. And I really liked her other book, Pretty Guilty Women, so I was like, I'm going to really enjoy this one too. And unfortunately, I gave this one 3 stars. We're following this case because we're getting interspurts of like this trial that's going on. We know someone is dead, and they're looking at this book club of these women, and they think that one of these women could have done it. Could it have been the author? Could it have been his wife? Could it have been one of her friends? Situation. This book is 380 pages long, and it just didn't need to be. Like, I really like the interwovenness of, like, you don't know everything, and so you need to piece it together. But it just, at one point, got really kind of boring and drawn out. And then when the twist happened, it came so out of left field. Like, we knew who this person was, but, like, it just made the rest of the story feel, like, not important at all. Like, it was, like, everything else was irrelevant. So I hate when endings happen like that, because I feel like when you pull a twist that, like, nobody can see coming because, like, there was no clues leading up to it, like, I don't appreciate books like that. So, unfortunately, I didn't like this one. But I gave it 3 stars because I was gripped enough to finish it, so I gave it 3 stars. Then we've got Kamala Harris's The Truth We Hold, An American Journey. This is her memoir that came out in 2019. I gave this one 4 stars. I listened to this on audio. I almost listened to this all in one day because I just was so captivated by it. She reads it herself, which I love when authors can do that, especially for a memoir. When you can read your own book, I am, like, sold, because I feel like you're telling me your story. Like, you're already telling me your story, but, like, when you can read it yourself, like, it feels that much more special. I didn't really know anything about her until she ran for vice president. So, this was like a complete learning experience for me, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. It's one of those things where, like, I hate reading memoirs because there's nothing wrong with this book, but, like, it wasn't anything that was like, oh my God, I, like, loved it so much, I need to give it 5 stars. So I gave it 4, but it was probably like a 5 in my opinion. I don't know how to rate things sometimes. But I really enjoyed this one because it really brought her story in, but it also brought, like, her thoughts on what's going on in the world as well. So it was kind of like a political piece, but it was also very much like a her story piece and how she ties into it. So I really enjoyed that. And something that I really thought was really interesting too, reading it with hindsight now, because obviously, like I said, this was published in 2019, and so much has happened in this world since then that it was, like, weird to hear her thoughts about things that might be to come that have kind of come to fruition, which is crazy. So I'm really glad that I read this one. This is a book that, like, I was really excited to have, but I was, like, slightly intimidated by it. I always get intimidated by nonfiction in general, but I'm so glad that I picked it up. So I'm just happy. I really liked that one. That same day that I finished that one, like I said, I was on a cleaning spurt. I finished another audiobook in that same day, and that was Layover by Gabby Noon. Now, this was one that I was supposed to be reading for a challenge of reading 5 books before the year was over. This was a book that I was dying to read when it came out. I never bought it. Then it finally came out. Still never bought it. And then I finally bought it in 2020 because I bought it, like, during the pandemic. And I was like, maybe I'll finally get to it now. Didn't read it. So I put it on that list to read, and I finally read it. And I can safely say I wish I didn't read it. So they said that this is a book for people who like The Good Place, which I love The Good Place, so I was really here for it. It's a YA novel about a girl who dies, and instead of going straight to heaven, she kind of ends up on this airplane to purgatory, and she is told that she basically has to help, like, a whole bunch of souls pass on. And at one point, she gets assigned this guy who she knows, based off of, like, what she's seen, and that he is her murderer. Like, he is the reason she is dead. And there's also, like, a weird love connection going on. I gave it 3 stars. I probably should have given it a little less, but part of me was giving it the benefit of the doubt that it's YA and it's not written for me. So I shouldn't necessarily love it, but it didn't work for me. Looking at this cover and thinking about the topic and comparing it to The Good Place, like I expected it to be like this really fun book, and it wasn't. Like, it talks about like abortion and having sex before marriage and just like things that like would like possibly prevent you from getting to heaven, but like I didn't want it to go there necessarily because, like I said, this cover looked fun. Like, I didn't expect it to really get into, like, the nitty-gritty about things like that. Not that I have a problem with that. I just, like, it was just, like, one of those things where, like, it just wasn't what I was expecting from a story like this. Especially because it says it's a cheeky take with sass, angst, and heart. And I was like, I didn't feel that. Like, I didn't feel sad. Like, I felt like there's no growth. Like, there's a character who, like, has helped a whole ton of souls, and, like, she's able to finally go to heaven, but she's got, like, the same attitude as what I feel like she probably went there with, and it just was, like, this, like, nah, I don't know. It just gave me the wrong vibes, and I'm really sorry, but I really didn't like this, and I don't know how to describe it, because I just didn't like it. I just didn't like it. Okay, then I read Black Enough, and this is a story that I started back in like March of last year. I feel like I remember reading it last year. I put it down, I didn't finish it, and then I was like, you know what, time to finish this. Found it on Kindle Unlimited, and I figured this will be perfect. I could read these stories in the middle of the night, and that's exactly what I did. Now, anthologies are not my best friend by any means. I don't like being thrown into a story and then being sucked right back out and getting thrown into another story. I like my stories to be a little bit more fleshed out. So even though I do try these from time to time, I'm just really bad at reading them. But I did like the importance of it. I wrote in my review because I loved the way the synopsis said it on Goodreads about how it's diversity within diversity. And I just feel like it's a very important message for a lot of teens to read and really to be able to be good allies to their peers and understand what their peers are going through or might be going through. And that there's just a variety of different types of stories and a variety of different types of situations and different types of prejudices. And I love that this comes from a variety of backgrounds too. So you've got people from different socioeconomic statuses, and maybe they're an immigrant, or it comes from so many different backgrounds, and it was really interesting. So like the intersectionality of sexuality and gender and all, it covers it all. It covers it all. So definitely highly recommend you check this one out, even though it wasn't necessarily for me. I think that a lot of people could benefit from reading some stories like this, especially if you like short stories. Highly recommend it. Just didn't work for me. Then we've got, I read The Accomplice, which I borrowed from my library, so I'll stick a picture here. I DNF'd this after 70 pages. I just didn't care. We were following these two people. They meet in college, and it bounces back and forth between when they meet in college to the present, where the man, his wife has gone missing. And then we find out that she has been murdered, and he kind of is obviously being looked at as a suspect, and his friend, she's a girl too, so like she kind of like tries to help him out, and I don't know. I just didn't find myself caring. I liked the current timeline, but when they kept flashing back to college, I was like, I don't care. I don't care. Like, they kept trying to like say how shady the girl was, and that like she had a background that was like so secretive, and I didn't care. And then I realized by like page 70, I was like, I don't know any more than I knew in the synopsis. Like, I didn't know anything. I didn't care to know anymore, and it felt like it was going nowhere, so I DNF'd it. Then I read People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. My hold from the library came through. I just felt like this was a book that I kept not necessarily putting off, because I meant to read both this and Beach Read this summer, and I got to Beach Read and just never got to this one. And then the summer was over, and I was like, I can't read it now. So I felt like it was like a book that I was like putting off without really putting off. And so I decided to put a hold on it at the library, and I was like, if it comes in, cool, I'll read it that way. If not, I could always read it physically. And my hold came through for my Kindle, so I picked it up, and I'm glad that I did. I gave it 3.5 stars. I think Beach Read was much better. I don't understand why they call this People We Meet on Vacation. These are people that have been friends for basically ever. And they used to go on a summer vacation together all the time. And we know that they have stopped speaking for the last 2 years. She works for this company that basically sends her on vacations, and she basically blogs and tries to get other people to want to go on these types of vacations. So she decides, like, as a last-ditch effort to get her friend back in her life, hey, let's go on this vacation. And they plan to go to his brother's wedding. And they're trying to do it basically like they did in college and try to do it cheaply. And she secretly, like, loves him, and, like, they kind of are gonna potentially be more than just friends. I gave it 3.5 stars. I liked the travel aspect and all that. It just felt a little flat, and I also just felt like a lot of things just weren't necessarily addressed. These friends went 2 years without speaking, and then they just go on this trip, and they kind of, like, fall kind of right back into banter. Like, they never really addressed, like, why they stopped talking to each other, and it kind of, that bothered me, because it's one of my biggest pet peeves of, like, people who fight and then get together and act like nothing happened. Like, that is, like, I hate that. Like, I do not like it in books. I don't like it in my personal life. I just don't like it. And then I kept waiting to find out, like, why they weren't speaking, because it flashes back between, like, their current trip that they're on and, like, previous trips that they have gone on. So I kept waiting, like, why aren't they speaking? Why aren't they speaking? And when we found out why they weren't talking, I was like, this is really stupid. Like, I was expecting it to be, like, this big catastrophic event, and it didn't really feel like it was that catastrophic. So it just kind of was like, so I wanted to give it 4 stars until I found out why they weren't speaking. I was like, that was really stupid and really petty. So I went with 3.5 stars instead. Still enjoyed it. It was still a fun read. I just feel like it could have been done differently. And then another book that I borrowed from the library, because, like I said, most of these I have read either as an ebook from my library, an audiobook from my library, or Kindle Unlimited or something. Very few were physically read. But I borrowed this one from the library as well, and that is The Invisible Husband of Frick Island by Colleen Oakley. I loved one of her previous books. I'm forgetting what it's called right now. And of course, it's nowhere behind me. But I loved her previous book, so I immediately purchased this one this year. And I have to say, I didn't love this one as much as I love the other one. The other one I felt like I had a real emotional connection with, because I remember bawling my eyes out. And this one, I didn't really get that emotional. So we're following a man, and he is a journalist of sorts, and he's trying to get this podcast going. And he goes to Frick Island because they're having this, like, Frick Island cake day thing. And he goes to go there, and it's rained out, so he can't really go there. And they're like, you missed the important story. And he goes back, and he, like, tries to talk to this girl. And the girl's like, sorry, my husband's here. Like, this is awkward. But husband's not there, and everybody on Frick Island is acting like this guy is there. Her husband died in a storm, but she thinks she's interacting with basically an invisible man. So he really wants to dive into this of, like, why is her husband invisible? Why is everybody on this small island, like, pretending he's invisible too? Like, this is strange, and kind of their ultimate, like, romance. Again, very similar to People We Meet on Vacation. I expected something a little bit more dramatic to happen. It was a fun story. I liked the mystery going along with it, but I just felt like I wanted something more dramatic to happen. So I still gave it 4 stars. It was still really good, but I need the drama. Bring me the drama. Couldn't have asked that to happen. Okay, then I listened to Rafe by Rebecca Weatherspoon. This one was, like, all over the buzz world last year, I feel like, and this is about a buff babysitter where he is looking for a new job. He's a babysitter, and this woman named Sloan, she's a doctor. She's just recently went through a divorce, and she needs a babysitter, and they get together. I gave this one 3 stars. I just felt like they went from, like, strangers to lovers really, really quickly. He's there for the interview, and he's like, hey, by the way, I've never worked for somebody that I have found this attractive. And then, like, the next day, she's like, I've never had somebody work for me that was this attractive. let's just get together and have a no strings attached relationship. So when the kids go to sleep, we'll watch a movie and just do it. And I don't know. It didn't do it for me. It just felt like it was just like pure sex all the time, which I feel like there's a time and a place for a book like that. I just wanted something that had a little bit more depth to it. They like tried to have some depth, but it just felt very superficial. And then it ended, and it had one of my biggest pet peeves. I just talked about a different pet peeve, but this pet peeve is I don't like when books have a sex scene in the epilogue, because I just feel like at this point, like, the story is over. We don't need to be having more sex. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. 3 stars. I also read An Honest Lie by Taryn Fisher. I got this book through NetGalley, and I didn't like this one. I gave it 2.5 stars. I actually almost DNF'd it, to be honest. It's about, we're following 2 perspectives. We're following one perspective where this woman is dating this guy. She just left New York to come live with him in, I want to say, Washington. And she's trying to integrate herself into his life. They've been together, I think, like a year. And his friends, like the girl part of the friend group, like invites her to Vegas. And then the other perspective, we're following a woman named Summer, and she's clear, like, her mom kind of gets her involved in like a cult. I almost DNF'd it in the beginning because I was just so confused. Like, the way the writing style was, I just felt like I wasn't connecting to anybody, and I really didn't know what was going on. But I felt like these stories felt very, like, again, 2 separate stories that are eventually supposed to, like, potentially connect. And the way they connected just felt really stupid. I don't know how to describe it without, like, spoiling it, but it just, like, it felt like she made it stretch. Like, she stretched it to make it work. Like, it didn't feel like it worked to me, and I just didn't like it. So I gave it 2.5 stars, which is so sad because this is my 4th Taryn Fisher book. So, like, I had really high hopes for it. It was one that I was really anticipating. I really loved The Wives. I really liked Bad Mommy. I think it has a different title. I Could Be a Better You. And then I liked The Wrong Family. So I was really anticipating this one, but I don't know what it is about this one, but I was expecting it to be twistier. I wasn't expecting, like, the cult aspect, and, like, I actually ended up becoming more invested in that part of the story, and then it didn't work for me. And then I finished an audiobook. I finished Hamnet, and this is the last book that I finished by Maggie O'Farrell. Again, like, I started really high. I had so many 5 stars, and then by the end, I just, like, trickled off. This one I gave 3 stars to. I listened to this one on audio. It was pitched to me as, like, William Shakespeare has a son named Hamnet, and Hamnet dies, and that is basically what inspired him to write Hamlet. So I thought we were following William Shakespeare. And then I listened to it on audio, and it's actually following his wife. And the beginning, like, starts talking about something completely different, and then it, like, backwards, it, like, rewinds and starts again. So I was, like, very confused, because I was like, wait a minute. Like, we were looking at Hamnet, and then next thing we knew, like, Hamnet wasn't born yet, and I was very lost. So I was very lost in the beginning, and then I finally got into the story, and I was like, oh, okay, so we're following William Shakespeare's wife. But, like, we never really know that he's William Shakespeare. Like, we, like, know it because we've read the synopsis, but they kept kind of, like, referring to him as, like, her husband and not by name. So, like, it could have been anybody. Like, obviously, once we got to the end, like, it was very obvious that it was William Shakespeare, but, like, throughout it, I was like, this could be anybody. This could be anybody's story. So I feel like if I went into it, like, knowing I was getting her story, maybe I would have been bought into it a little bit more, but because I was so discombobulated, I couldn't get into it as much as I wanted to. It was very well written and very, like, I liked the writing style. It just wasn't the story I was expecting to get, if that makes sense. And I feel like expectations can really have an effect on what your thoughts are. I ended the month having a bunch of books that I was currently reading. I am still currently reading The Dating Plan by Sarah Desai. I'm about halfway through this at this point. So I will talk more about that in my wrap-up in the next one. I'm also reading How to Kill Your Best Friend by Lexi Elliott. I'm about 58 pages in. And then I accidentally started a book that I was supposed to read in April, at the end of March. I got about 40 pages into A More Perfect Union, and then I told myself, no, you're not allowed to read that. You weren't supposed to read that till April, so I stopped. I have now since finished it, because now it's April. So I've finished it, but again, these will be in my next wrap-up. So I read a lot of really great things in March. I read a lot of things that I really, really enjoyed and loved, and then there were a bunch that kind of just didn't quite do it. But I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know your thoughts about any of these books down below. What's the favorite book that you read in April? And I will see you guys really soon. Bye, everybody.